Yeah.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So nice to see you and
Good to
meet
see
you.
you. I was about to say good morning, but it's not good morning anymore. When you work from home, it's kind of crazy. You forget what time of day it is.
Definitely. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely, no problem.
So, I was doing my research and you are so busy.
I am very
Um,
busy, yes.
yeah.
Especially right now. It seems like I'm actually kind of in the process right now of trying to figure out how I can kind of streamline things a bit better because I feel like I might have overextended myself a little bit, but there's nothing on my plate that I really want to get rid of. So it's just
Right.
about finding balance for sure.
Could we start by talking about how you transitioned from being a performance major in college to
Mhm.
building your own studio and being like self-sufficient in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about that because I think it's something that, especially in the area that we live in, it's very much driven towards band directing. That's your choice, right? You want to do something in the music world. They want you to, they just immediately push you towards either being a band director or being a music teacher in, say, elementary school or something like that. And I found that to be true, especially when I was getting ready to go to Southern. I always knew that I wanted to go to Southern. And I always knew I wanted to be a musician. But I also equally knew, as passionate as I was about flute, I did not want to be a band director. That was not what I wanted to do. But across the board, everyone that I talked to said, you need to do that. You need to get an education degree because you're going to need to fall back on it. There's no way you'll be able to be successful and make a living doing anything other than band directing. And that was really, that was kind of sad to me because it would have been like almost like them telling me I needed to get a backup plan in coaching basketball or something. That's literally how much I knew like that's not for me. And I have so much respect for band directors, but I see, what they do in terms of doing marching band and just there's so many facets to being a band director other than just teaching music. I just knew that wasn't for me. So when I started taking lessons from Danilo my senior year in high school, I was really refreshed by him and by his outlook on things because he was like, no, you don't want to be a band director, don't be a band director. There's plenty of ways that you can make a living doing this. So I think the biggest thing for me was I started networking really early on, and I can't say enough good things about networking. I think that it is so important in any career, but specifically when you're wanting to studio build, because how do you build a studio, right? Like how is this a possibility? The first thing that I had to do was figure out where I was going to do it. So I had started teaching lessons on the coast as a freshman in college. I was approached about that actually at a Southern Miss football game. I was playing my piccolo, everything's going great. And then somebody like walked up and was like, hey, we'd really like to get you to come down once a week and do this, do that at the middle school. And I was very excited about it, but of course it was difficult to schedule. You know how it is, especially afternoons as a music majors, it can be really, really tricky, but made it work. And I started networking and I started to notice that the coast was kind of a hotbed for lessons. The bulk of my studio became, being at Ocean Springs. So I had 8 students and I would go down on like a Monday evening and I would teach from 4 o'clock all the way, until I got done. It was tough, but I started to notice that taking lessons on the coast wasn't something that was encouraged. It was almost something that was expected. Do you want to be good? Okay, here's your private lessons teacher. So whenever my husband and I got married and we started talking about where we wanted to, build our lives, there were 2 things that I knew I always wanted to do. The first was to be a wife and a mom, and the second was to be a flute teacher. Thankfully, those 2 could go hand in hand. It's one of the few things that you can actually do and make a living doing, and you're still at home. I was still, I was teaching every evening, but thankfully, I was able to strap my kids, to me if they were a baby or have them over to the side playing. but I was still able to actually, have that studio. So I was a stay-at-home mom and I studio taught and I taught every evening. Probably the most difficult part about my job is when I have to do it. And I still struggle with that even today. You have to teach when the kids are out of school. You can travel teach and you can try to go to band, directors and say, hey, can I come in and pull your kids for lessons? But it's just not ideal. So that is one difficult thing. But I just schedule lessons for every evening. And then through a lot of trial and error, I just figured out how to make it work and how to make it a full-time income.
I imagine though that separating home life when your work is at your home, that must be difficult.
It's very difficult. Even now, I'll be here at my desk and my kids have just kind of come to know, when mom's at this desk, I got to be kind of self-sufficient. It's much easier now. I have a 10-year-old and an almost 8-year-old. I can very, very well remember there being times in lessons where I had like a naked toddler running around and I was like, oh my God, I got to go put pants on. And then like I had my baby strapped to me and I was trying to play flute and like I'm married to a football coach. So during the fall, I'm pretty much a single mom anyway. I'm trying to, have dinner on the stove and just have all this stuff going on at once. So definitely multitasking. And at the end of the night, it kind of feels like you've run a marathon. But I kept trying to tell myself I'm very grateful. I get to be home with my kids every day. I don't have to take them to daycare. I can make this work. It's just a little stressful. It's very difficult to make a full-time living being a studio teacher unless you get really creative. And that's kind of what I had to do is figure out multiple ways to make income. For a long time on Sundays, I had 2 to 3 churches that I would kind of travel to at different times, playing gigs, playing services. And of course, every evening I was teaching lessons. And then when my kids got a little bit older and they were in school, I started being able to travel teach. So again, the area that you're in is so important and networking is so important. Reaching out to band directors and saying, hey, I want to come in and I want to help you. Is this a possibility? Is this something that you would like for me to do? And, just open the door to conversation. Some schools I would go in and teach all of their flute classes for the whole day. Some places I would just go in and pull students for individual work to help them catch up. Some would just want me to come in for a sectional maybe once a month. But figuring out, where I can be the most useful for each specific program was huge. And in doing that, it takes time, but then all of a sudden you have people calling you and saying, hey, oh my gosh, I heard such and such band at this competition and their flute sounded great. And they said that you were the one that was coming in and teaching them. Would you mind coming and helping us? It's something that definitely is constantly morphing and takes time to kind of develop. But the biggest thing that you can do for yourself in any aspect of this career is networking and never burning a bridge and always making sure that the lines of communication are open. That's what's really, really helped me.
How do you structure the different services that you offer, and how do you decide how much to charge for them?
That is actually a really great question. It's very difficult. So when I first started doing this, I moved to the coast in 2013 and I had been here for a while, just kind of commuting down and teaching specifically at Ocean Springs and their schools. And then kind of, starting to branch out. One of the biggest obstacles that I found was almost everybody knew me as little Callie Green, first chair lines band, high school student, but I wasn't anymore. I was a flutist with a master's degree, with a family, and this was a job. This was not me coming in just to help for the fun of it. This was actually me, needing to make a career out of this. So I found it really difficult, especially with some of the band directors. They had known me so well in high school. I ran into some issues also with going to schools to teach lessons and then having kids be absent that day. Well, the band director wouldn't know the kid was going to be absent. Nobody's going to tell me. I'm going to show up to teach the lesson, and now what? So there's definitely a lot of communication that has to happen. And I really hit a lot of roadblocks for a very long time. And I remember sitting down and telling my husband, like, okay, on paper, I'm supposed to make this, but this month I only made this, and that is really difficult, especially when the money is trickling in little by little and you need to pay your bills, right? So one of the things that I really had to figure out was a system that was put in place across the board. And sometimes I'll be honest with you, sometimes people don't want to abide by the system. And I end up, just having to say, I'm so sorry that we couldn't come to an agreement, that we couldn't figure anything out. I apologize. One thing that's been great for me is I'm the only one that does what I do on the coast. So when people say, well, I'm not going to do what I'm just not going to abide by her payment, policy, or I'm not going to abide by her attendance policy. And I say, okay, I wish you the best of luck finding another teacher. There is no other teacher. So,
Yeah.
it's like one of the things that I did was create a policy. And I actually reached out to several different music studios. My best friend lives in Ohio, and then another lives in Chicago. So I had two like really great music studios. Both of their children attend music classes in different stages. One is in elementary school and one is in high school. What do they send you? Their policy, their schedule. Because my friends kept saying to me, like, I would say, I didn't get paid by this student, blah, blah, blah. They're like, wait a minute, no. Okay. What we do is like we pay the same thing per month across the board. And if we can't make the lesson, that's on us. If the teacher has to cancel, then she will give us the option of a credit on the next month or a makeup slot. So I started doing some information, digging kind of around in studios that were close to me, gymnastics, cheer, any kind of anything that you're going to do with your child. And I noticed a few things. Firstly, everybody is going to pay a registration fee at the beginning of every either semester or season or year, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you've been taking forever or if you've been taking, you're a new person. It doesn't matter. You're going to pay that registration fee. That's going to give you a little bit of wiggle room at the beginning of each semester, at the beginning of each year, that you can put aside and you can say, okay, if there's a month that's particularly difficult, I've got this registration fee. Okay. And I noticed that it was usually anywhere between $50 and $75. And so that's what I started charging. The second thing I have in place is a detailed studio agreement. They're going to sign it. It's like a legal binding document. I'm going to sign it. They're going to sign it. I'm going to send them a copy of it. And it's going to say in there every single thing they need to know regarding what happens if they miss a lesson, what happens if I need to miss a lesson, the payment policy, all of the things. We go over that in detail with the student, with the parent at the beginning of the semester. If they decide that that's not something they want to do, then we don't sign up and that's enough. That's it. It's been very refreshing to me. And I've noticed this a lot this year from the beginning of the year, specifically with the studio that I have. I've lost two grandparents in 2 months and I've had to cancel 3 weeks of lessons. It's been very difficult this semester, but I've been able to communicate with them and say, per our studio agreement, I'm going to give you the option of a credit on next month, or I'm going to give you this date for a makeup. And everybody's been really great about it. I find that the more you communicate up front, the easier things are. And I think it's like that with everything. But as long as everyone kind of knows the expectation, then we're good to go. I also started, instead of charging by the week, I just charge by the month, and I just call it tuition. You're not paying per lesson, you're paying for a studio slot. That's what you're paying. So what I do is everyone gets a 30-minute lesson. I stopped offering hour lessons for the age group that I usually teach. It's just too much. I have some students, specifically my Lions Band caliber students, like 2 years ago, I had 5 that were in Lions Band. 5 of the 8 were mine, and they were great and they were doing amazing. They would have been able to do an hour lesson. But for me, I'm thinking about the way to make it the best financially, right? Having to block off an hour when I only have a specific amount of time in the evenings, it just wasn't working. So every slot is a half-hour slot. I charge $25 for an hour or for a half-hour slot. Danilo tells me all the time I should charge more, but knowing what other people charge in my area and knowing what I do about my area, that's the sweet spot. That's what people are willing to spend. At the beginning of every month, whether the month has 4 or 5 weeks in it, they're gonna get $100 tuition voucher that they need to pay. And then it ends up always working out because I'm going to take some weeks off based on the school, when my kids are in school, spring break, Christmas, all of those things. I tend to follow the school calendar, and it always ends up working out. So that's how I do things on the studio side of it. The travel teaching side of it is a little bit different because you are basically invoicing the band program. Some bands pay me through the band boosters. Some schools pay me through their actual school, and I have a 1099 form that I get. The biggest thing that I have to do in those situations is at the beginning, be, again, very, very clear communication on what is expected of me, what is expected of them, and what's going to happen. It never fails. There'll be a school that'll owe me four, five, six, $800, and I end up having to just say, hey, I haven't gotten the check yet. That's no problem. Don't worry about it. Just let me know whenever you guys have sent it, and I'll make sure that I start coming back then. I don't want to keep coming and keep incurring higher, bill until you guys get that one paid. And that seems to work pretty well. But again, that's one of the things that I've had to cut down a little bit on, because now that I'm working for flute specialists and I'm doing more and more on that end, there's just not enough hours in the day. And honestly, that was something that was pretty specific for spring anyway, because summer and fall is all eaten up with marching band rehearsals. And Callie doesn't teach marching at all. I will go in and teach sectionals for marching band, but my days of being out in the heat are over. So that's most of the band programs that I work with, they actually will march during the school day. But yeah, there are only so many hours in the day.
That's a good problem to have, though, especially for someone who has chosen performance when, as soon as you start, they drill. Unless you're really dedicated, you might not get a job.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, how much of a nightmare are taxes?
Okay, so taxes are a little bit of a nightmare to everyone, but one of the things that I have really, really found to be nice, and I will tell you, I might be singing a different tune this time next year, because next year will be my first full year with Flute Specialist. I only worked from Thanksgiving week, right before Black Friday. So they're like, hey, you're the new social media marketing director. Good luck with Black Friday. Here you go. I'm like, so I only had to pay in like 6 weeks of taxes for Flute Specialist last year. So this time next year, I may be going, oh my God, girl, I lied to you. But I created an LLC, and I recommend that for every single person who is trying to teach, trying to do anything. And the reason why is because it opens a lot of doors in terms of tax write-offs, down to your phone bill, your car, your mileage, a portion of your office, a portion of your power bill, anything I do travel wise, any purchase I make for my instruments themselves. It opens up a door where you're able to write things off to offset the income. And it's things that you're already going to be buying, already going to be spending money on. And it's a way to reduce the amount of taxes that you're going to owe. One of the things that I have started doing this year is I just have a dedicated little account on the side. And every time I get paid, I just do the math and I put that much over in an account. At the end of the year, hopefully, I will have enough write offs to offset it. If I don't, the money's there. If I can do it, then hey, it's savings account, right? Um, but yeah, there are very creative things that you can do, but I just work with an accountant, and some at the end of this year, he will probably say, hey, you're either going to have to pay in X or you need to go buy a flute. And at that point, I'll buy a flute. It'll be a tax write-off. And I would rather purchase a flute for myself than to pay the government.
Just as we start to wrap things up a little bit, what advice would you give someone who is about to graduate with their bachelor's degree in performance, or someone who's looking to pursue that career field? What would be some general advice or the strongest tip that you would give to someone in that spot?
Okay. Gosh, I could give you so many. The first one I would say, and it's probably the most important one, is that you have to believe in yourself that you can make it work. Everyone's going to tell you that you can't make it work. Everybody's going to tell you, oh, this is never going to happen. It's going to be super hard. And yes, it's going to be hard, but so is band directing, so is teaching, so is everything. There are ups and downs to everything. For me, I always had a very strong desire to share the joy that I find in music with others. I always knew that I wanted to perform, but I also wanted to teach. I think it's really important for you to continually tell yourself that this is something that is possible. And there are so many different ways that you can make it happen. You just have to get creative. The next thing I'll tell you is to constantly network. Everybody that you meet, there is a value to knowing them. Prime example, Danilo is very, very close with Robert at Flute Specialist. I've been working with Flute Specialist since 2005 to get my own instruments fixed. To every semester, I would get a load of flutes sent from my studio for my students who were wanting to upgrade. Anytime I wanted to make a purchase, I just always went through there. I went to NFA this past year. I talked with them, and Danilo said to Robert, Robert, she would be really great for you, for social media, for marketing, for sales. She's got that personality. She'd be great. And out of the blue, at the end of October, beginning of November, Robert calls. I never would have gotten that job, which I love so much, if not for the connections that I have to Danilo and the connections that I have now through Robert. So that's the biggest thing that you can do, is to constantly be networking and constantly be marketing yourself. It's not expensive at all. You can get a free website. All of the things that you can do to promote yourself is super, super huge. There are going to be times that you're going to probably want to give up and you're going to say, oh my gosh, this is not possible. There's no way that I can do this. I've done it many times over the years, more times than I can count. The biggest thing that I have to continually tell myself is, when I get into those low spots, that there is a better time coming. It just, you have to get through those highs and lows. Sometimes your studio is going to dip. Sometimes, you're going to have students to quit. Sometimes a school is going to call you and say, hey, we can't pay you anymore. And those times are hard. So the easiest thing, or the best thing that you can do for yourself, is to try to plan ahead and save up for those times, because they're going to come. But as long as you stay the course, as long as you believe in yourself, and as long as you know that it is something that is possible and it's something that's worthy and it's worthwhile, you can do it. There's a million different ways you can make money being a musician. It doesn't just have to be one specific thing. Just stack your little jobs up. Know that sometimes you're going to be super busy, and some days I get up and I teach a music appreciation class, and I come home and I do sales calls, and then I do the marketing, and then I take some more, calls, and then I go pick up my kids from school, and I come home and I teach lessons, and it's crazy. But at the end of the day, it's what I want to do. And it's the only thing I can see myself doing and loving doing. So that makes a huge
Yeah.
difference. I had to make the decision. Okay. I met my husband. He wasn't my husband at the time. And I was like, I really want to be a wife and a mom and a teacher, but I also have this scholarship waiting for me to go get my doctorate. Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to go off and perform? Do I want to do that? And at one day, I just had that moment of clarity, and I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. But it is so important for people like us to understand that that is just as worthwhile as what other people are doing. And that is just as needed, because nobody is going to get to where Juilliard or all of these places without a good foundation. And that's where we come in.
And also, just like everyone's path to success, especially in music, is so different.
Very different.
And there are so many ways that you can find happiness and fulfillment, even if, someone gets a bachelor's degree and then finds something else to do.
Exactly.
So
The
it's,
greatest thing about music is that you never have to stop. Once you find your niche, once you find your place, once you find exactly what you want to do, it becomes a whole lot less scary and a whole lot more fun.